Earlier this week, it emerged that serving Metropolitan Police Officer David Carrick used his position to rape, imprison and assault at least 12 women over 20 years. That was despite there being multiple incidents over that period that were brought to the attention of the police. And now it turns out that there are some 800 other officers under investigation within the Met, with more than 1,000 claims of sexual or domestic abuse against them. In response to Carrick's conviction on 49 charges, Home Secretary Suella Braverman gave this statement to the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, from the moment I became Home Secretary, I've made clear that things have to change. Public trust is precious. Our model of policing by consent cannot work effectively without it. I discussed this case yesterday with the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Sir Mark Rowley, and I'm encouraged by the action that he has taken so far with his team to root out officers who are not fit to wear the badge. This effort is being spearheaded by a new anti-corruption and abuse command. But there is still some way to go to ensure that the force can command the trust of the people that it serves. It is vital that the Metropolitan Police and other forces double down on their efforts to root out corrupt officers. This may mean more shocking cases come to light in the short term.
So the revelations about Carrick come nearly 2 years since the shocking abduction, rape and murder of Sarah Everard by another serving Met officer, Wayne Couzens. So what exactly has the Home Office done to make sure that police officers aren't a danger to women since then? Well, not a lot, according to Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper.
There are still no legal requirements on vetting. Forces can effectively do what they want. They don't even have to check employment history and character references, and some don't. They don't even have to interview people beforehand. And when the inspectorate came up with damning conclusions that hundreds, if not thousands, of police officers who should have failed vetting, including corrupt and predatory officers who have committed, including officers who have committed offences on indecent exposure and domestic abuse, are still in the job, the policing minister refused to even make it a requirement for police forces to follow the recommendations of the inspectorate. They just shrugged and said that it was a matter for police forces to follow. There's been no response to make this compulsory to follow vetting guidance, no requirement to make it compulsory to follow the reforms. And all we've got in this statement is a continuation of existing Angelini review and a new review, another one on dismissals, which I welcome because there are concerns that the dismissals process has become more difficult and has become worse since well-intended reforms were introduced but have not worked as intended. So I welcome that review, but it was announced in October and it still hasn't started, and all the Home Secretary has done is re-announce it today. And some of the things that police forces have been doing to tackle misogyny or to increase diversity, to improve their response to communities and to crime, the Home Secretary has dismissed as woke, even though they are about tackling some of the most serious crimes.
That's a pretty powerful indictment. Let's play Braverman's response.
It's a disappointment that the Shadow Home Secretary has resorted to cheap political lines. I don't think today is a day for political attacks. There's been a human tragedy at the heart of this case, and ultimately, politics should be set aside.
Politics should be set aside. Now, one of the issues with the Carrick case is that because of his many previous run-ins with the law, multiple police officers must have known that he was potentially a danger, even keeping him on the force after he was arrested on an accusation of rape in the summer of 2021. So what does that say about the safety of the Met as a whole? That's a question that Susanna Reid put to Met Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley.
How does any woman reporting a sexual offence against them know that the person they're reporting it to is not in some way either accused of something similar or tolerating something similar in their department? How on earth, being told that it's all right, most of them are all right, doesn't mean that, as we know, that there aren't people there who might have been offending for, in this case, 20 years while Metropolitan Police officers. How do I know that?
I'm not going to make a promise that I can't stick to. I'm going to put in place ruthless systems to squeeze out those who shouldn't be with us. Most of our officers are fantastic. The people who specialise in this area are great and they have the skills. But do I have some officers who shouldn't be in the Met that I've got to identify and get rid of? Yes, I do, and I'm completely frank about that.
The problem of predatory and abusive police officers extends far beyond the Met. Andy Cook is the Chief Inspector of Constabulary. He's in charge of maintaining standards in police forces across England and Wales. In the wake of the Carrick revelations, he appeared before Parliament's Home Affairs Select Committee, where its chair, Labour's Diana Johnson, asked him this.
Can I just ask you very bluntly then, do you think that the police service is institutionally sexist?
No, I don't. And I think if we look at the fact that we now have more female police officers than before, on the most recent intakes, 4 out of every 10 officers who were joining are female officers. Roughly 40% of the policing establishment is female and 40% of chief constables are female. So policing has come on leaps and bounds over many, many years in relation to this. Institutionally misogynist? No, I don't think it is. Is there significant issues in parts of policing? Is there significant issues with individuals and groups in parts of policing? Then yes, there is.
Okay, because I'm just looking at your report from the end of last year. We are left in no doubt that in too many places a culture of misogyny, sexism and predatory behaviour towards members of the public and female police officers and staff still exists.
Absolutely. And we did a survey of 11,000 officers and staff, and those results were shocking.
I think actually we should call this for what it is, and it's actually institutional sexism.
I will say there are significant issues in relation to sexism and misogyny.
There are multiple problems with sexism and misogyny everywhere, but it's not institutional. It seems a little bit counterintuitive to me. What of Rishi Sunak, though? Well, after meeting with the Met Commissioner, he spoke to Sky News and revealed the government's plan to keep dangerous police officers out of the Met.
I've just had a constructive meeting with the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police and made clear to him, and he agrees, that the abuse of power that we've seen this week is absolutely despicable and it needs to be addressed immediately. Now, that's why all police forces across the country have been told to check all of their serving officers and staff against national police databases to identify and root out anybody who shouldn't be serving. The government's done a huge amount already to protect the safety of women and girls, but we will keep going and doing whatever it takes to ensure that women and girls feel safe and can go about their lives freely and without fear.
Now, that might sound like a good start, but it's not clear exactly what checking police officers against national databases will reveal. Carrick, for example, was never arrested until 2021, and it's not clear that he was ever even cautioned. Will complaints show up on this database, or do people have had to have been found to have taken part in wrongdoing? It all seems a little bit ambiguous, and there's little reason to feel reassured because in 2017, Carrick did undergo a supposedly tougher revetting procedure, and he passed. And as we know, there have been multiple complaints made against him by that point.
Suella Braverman is someone who fundamentally believes that the police are a good and neutral institution who have been tarnished by a few bad apples, but with the right reforms, checks and balances, vetting processes, and recruitment policies, the order can be restored. Of course, this obscures the fact that the police are fundamentally a violent, misogynistic, sexist force. It's not just institutional. This is what the police exist to do. When she says, for example, that we have a system in the UK of policing by consent, that's perfectly true of a tiny minority of bobbies on the beat, patrolling leafy suburbs, giving a wink and a wave to, passing school children or whatever. But for the vast majority of this country, we don't have policing by consent, but by brute force. We have tasers, we have kettles, we have tear gas, we have automated policing and predictive policing, facial recognition algorithms with inbuilt racism. And so the idea that the police system is a neutral and force for good, and that it just has lapsed is totally misguided. The idea also that bad people join the police force is a fundamentally good institution is also wrong. The fact is, anyone could join the police force, and the violence of the system itself, it's not that people are brutal per se, it's that the violence of the system brutalizes them. Mother Teresa could join the police force, and I'm sure she'd be a monster in not long at all. So I think fundamentally, Suella Braverman gets it wrong because she thinks that the police are the good guys, and all we need to do is restore law and order.
Do you not think there's maybe a bit of a danger in that kind of response that you've given there? Because, there presumably is a moment now where there can be real public consensus to have really strong, tough reforms in the police to sort of root out misogynists and rapists. And I don't think it's going to be easy. And I wouldn't trust the police to be left to do it themselves. But I think it's necessary. And I suppose if my concern with your intervention there is if we frame this as there are two options, abolishing the police or having a police force full of rapists, then, potentially that's polarizing something in a way that isn't necessarily going to be to the benefit of the left, because people might say, well, if the police will necessarily have rapists in it, I'm going to choose the police with some rapists in it because they don't want the alternative or your alternative, which seems to be no police.
The problem isn't really with who the police recruit, although that may be a small part of the problem. The problem is more so how the police operate and what that makes people do and what that turns people into. Of course, violent people are going to be more attracted to policing because I imagine they conceive of it as an opportunity to arrest, baton, cattle, all the things that I've said earlier, their fellow human beings. But I think fundamentally what the problem is how the police works. However, I do think that, as progressives, as leftists, we should avoid getting too caught up in the kind of in the weeds of thinking about how we reform, review, investigate policing, and use this as an opportunity to call for a divestment and a kind of reallocation of resources away from policing and into the kind of social services and state and non-state kind of infrastructure that makes that dismantles patriarchy outside of the police. The police aren't just some particular kind of champions or spearhead of patriarchy. They're a reflection of our broader society, and it's that needs to change. We need to create a society that doesn't require, not that it does, policing rather than reforming the police, because I think ultimately that buys into this idea that the police can be reformed. Now, of course, that isn't to say that I think things should remain as they are in the immediate term. What I'm saying is that I think we shouldn't expend too much energy imagining what tinkering we can do to the Metropolitan Police, because ultimately I think that solutions lie outside of it.